Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Hi, my name is Nidhi. I'm Nidhi, proud mother of a young man, creator of my own life, a lifelong seeker, an omnivore, a textile professional turned communication skills trainer, also an emotional clarity coach, and an author. So I welcome you all to my second live on LinkedIn and LinkedIn and YouTube. I'm so used to going live on Instagram that I mentioned Insta. It just comes smoothly. So if you've joined me, welcome, and wherever you're joining, today we are going to talk about a very, very important aspect of communication, and I want you to come up with your questions. And if you have any queries, any doubts, participate in whatever I am going to be talking about today because, yeah, I'm here for you. So, my first question would be, when do you think any kind of communication is successful? When do you think any kind of communication is actually successful? Do you think it's when you say what you have to, जब आपने अपनी बात कह दी? When you keep your message crisp and clear? When you are polite in communicating? When you are using the right language? Do you think when you're doing all of this, a communication is successful? What do you think about it? Well, my take on this is that your communication is only successful when the receiver, the person who's receiving your side of it, understands it exactly the same way you wanted him or her to understand. He or she perceives it exactly the way you want them to. क्योंकि अगर उन्होंने अलग मीनिंग लिया उसका, उन्होंने उसको अलग परसीव किया, उसको अलग समझा, then there is no, this communication is not successful. The cycle of communication is not successful. Then there's a possibility of conflicts and misunderstandings. नोटिस करिएगा, बहुत बार आप भी कुछ कहना चाहते हैं लेकिन दूसरा वाला उसको अलग तरीके से समझता है. So that is where communication is not really happening. You might feel everything is happening. So what really happens? There's a barrier that's played, right? So we need to understand what these barriers are which stop communication from happening. So let's talk about the barriers in communication today and how you can deal with those barriers, right? And just मैं आपसे बात करूंगी, I would love for you to tell me which is that barrier जो आपको बहुत तकलीफ देता है, या you usually have faced it, or something that you've overcome, right? So share your experiences too in the chat box. I am going to be reading all of them. Thank you, Varun. Thank you so much. So keep interacting, keep writing. What is it that you have? And even if you watch the recording later, you can still share with me. So don't worry at all. That's the beauty of lives today. You know, you go live, but everything is recorded and it's saved on the platform, so you can always come back to it, right? Okay, guys. So let's talk about barriers, and I'm going to talk about few barriers. I'm going to start with one of the most important ones: psychological barrier or the emotional barrier. This is one of the most important ones. Lack of attention. Okay, चाहे आप, if you are the one who is speaking, you are not attentive, the person who's receiving it is not attentive. You can be on either sides of the communication cycle, that's fine, guys. So basically there's lack of attention. There is premature evaluation, that means premature judgment. आपने पहले ही assume कर लिया, पहले ही आपने judge कर लिया आप जो सोचना चाहते हो, इससे पहले कि वो communication हुआ. uh, your attention power is weak, so poor attention, याद नहीं रहती चीजें. Emotions are very high or very low. या तो emotion exist ही नहीं कर रहे हैं, या emotions इतने high हैं that there's an overplay of emotions, either side of the communication, or there's distrust. You don't trust the person जिसके साथ आप बात कर रहे हैं. So any of these forms is a communication barrier. It's an emotional barrier. It's a psychological barrier. क्यों हम बोलते हैं? Because this is an overplay of emotions that happens. आप में से कितनों के साथ you've noticed a barrier whenever emotions are in play? Do write in the chat. I would love to listen to that. Now, how can you overcome this? कभी आपने नोटिस किया है कि आप गुस्से में हो, दूसरा इंसान भी गुस्से में बहुत बार रिएक्ट करता है, फिर आप रिएक्ट करते हो, फिर दूसरा रिएक्ट करता है, एंड दिस keeps on happening again and again. It keeps on happening, right? There is no end to that because your emotions are very high. Neither can you receive a negative emotion, and when you receive a negative emotion, most of the people tend to retaliate in the same way. आप पहले ही जज कर लेते हो, तब भी यही होता है कि आप इंफॉर्मेशन को एक्सेप्ट नहीं कर पाते हो. सो हाउ इज इट दैट यू कैन ओवरकम दिस बैरियर? सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट, बहुत बार ऐसा होता है, आप किसी से बात करना चाहते हो, यू गो एंड यू टॉक टू अ पर्सन and the person says, not now, please, I'm not in the state of mind. But because you want to talk and you want to put forward your point, आप उसको pursue करते हो and you force communication on that person. That's not going to help. So one way to deal with this is that understand the other person's desire to not communicate, please. If the person needs time, give them that time if it's possible. Because if you're going to communicate at a time when there's already a blockage, it's not going to help you at all. Right? There's always going to be a barrier. The communication is never going to be successful. So this is one way to deal with an emotional barrier. The other one is use clear language, short sentences, crisp and clear language जो दूसरे को समझ में आती है. Okay, use language what the other person would be ready to receive, right? उनको समझ में आना बहुत जरूरी है, whatever you're trying to say. So that is very important. The kind of words that you use when your emotions are very high, when you're emotionally high or no, you need to be very careful with that. Listen to it, listen with an open mind. Now this is if you're on the receiving end, listen with an open mind. You need to accept whatever you are listening, क्योंकि अगर आपने पहले ही सोच लिया कि आपको कैसे रिएक्ट करना है, आपको किस चीज का जवाब देना है, it's not going to help you. So be an active listener. So listen with an open mind, consume and absorb all the information and then respond accordingly rather than reacting. Another thing, acknowledge the emotions of the other person. It can be your body language, it can be emotions which are visible to you through the body language or through words, but acknowledge the emotions. Everybody, each one on this planet goes through emotions. You have your positives and your negatives, so acknowledge kariye dusre ke emotions. And if you're able to be more aware of that, aapka ye wala barrier definitely overcome hoga. People talk a lot about emotional intelligence and empathy. That is very, very important. It's not easy to master. I'm an EQ practitioner and I know it is difficult because empathy and EQ only comes when there is transformation from within. You need to introspect a lot. Self awareness बहुत जरूरी होती है उसके लिए. इसलिए कोशिश जरूर करिए to understand the other person's emotions, right? And if your retention is weak, please take notes whenever the other person speaking. ये मत सोचिए हाँ हाँ मुझे याद है, अभी याद है, अभी से 10 मिनट आगे you're not going to remember anything. So please take notes if possible. If your remembering power is not that great. I forget a lot. I make notes even when I'm communicating. Right now, I have my notes in front of me because I tend to forget. It's human nature. I'm not here to just remember everything and memorize it and come and discuss with you. No, it's not, doesn't happen like that all the time, right? make your notes. It doesn't make you weak at all. Okay, that's a sign of strength. That's a sign of being there in the moment, and that's the sign of valuing whatever you are there for. So notes बनाइए और communicate करिए. जो communicate हो रहा है आपसे उसका notes बना लीजिए. Then memory is fine. You can deal with all of that, right? Uh, Now, another thing that you can do is ask the other person if they have understood everything correctly, right? So ask दूसरों से पूछ लीजिए कि आपको समझ में आया जो मैंने बोला, so that there's no scope of any misunderstanding or any lack of information. Okay, so these are different ways how you can actually overcome emotional barriers or psychological barriers. So be very careful if you are dealing with those barriers, if you are on the receiving end or the giving end, but be very, very careful. Okay, another thing, keep writing your questions. I would love to hear them out and possibly answer them also. Okay, the next one is a barrier which is between you and me right now. Any guesses what this is? Any guesses? Any guesses? This is a barrier, a physical barrier, right? It's a physical barrier. Physical barrier बहुत तरीके के होते हैं. See, we are not physically in front of us. I do not know if you are there on the other side, if you're listening to me. I have no idea. I am live streaming this and I am, unless and until you interact in the chat, I will never come to know if you're there on the other side. So, in fact, that makes me realize that please do write in the chat box so that I know you're there, right? Because I don't come to know how many people are joining in and how many people are interacting or listening to me. So, लिखिएगा मेरे लिए भी अच्छा लगेगा कि आप हैं उधर. So, this is a physical barrier. Noise is a physical barrier. So, right now when I'm doing this live, I've just switched off the fans क्योंकि फैन की बहुत नॉइज आती है. फैन की नॉइज आती है तो फिर आपको भी डिस्टर्बेंस आएगा, right? And I don't know if my voice would go correctly. So noise is a physical barrier. Poor lighting can be a physical barrier. Um, we have large working areas that can be a physical barrier where people are very far away from each other. एक बड़ा सा हॉल है लेकिन लोग बहुत दूर बैठे हैं एक दूसरे से. That can be a physical barrier. Closed cabin spaces, closed spaces, office cabins होते हैं, that can be a physical barrier. Distance can be a physical barrier. Time causes physical barrier. Time zones अलग होते हैं, that causes a barrier. Technical issues. Uh, we are meeting right now through technology. If the technology fails us, then that's how it is. That's it, right? That can be a barrier between you and me. So that's also a physical barrier. Environmental conditions, physical barrier. मौसम खराब हो गया है, वो भी एक physical barrier है. You're not able to reach some place. Communication didn't happen. Uh, Over the last 2-3 years now, since COVID, and all of us have moved online, something that has become the easiest excuse to not attend a meeting or not be there is, and you can't do much about it. मेरा मौसम खराब है, वाईफाई is not working, technical glitch है, there's some connectivity issue. So these kind of issues have cropped up. Some people are genuinely suffering from them while others are making excuses. But yes, we do have technical issues. Time zones, environmental conditions ho gaya, distortion of messages. You want to write something, but the language you've used distorts or changes the whole meaning of the sentence. Over information, excess information is a barrier, is a physical barrier. You give me excess information, I have no place to store it. मेरा दिमाग हो गया, बंद हो गया, बाबा बोल नहीं सुनना. समुद्र मंडी से निधि हो गया, बस चुप हो जाओ, right? So too much of information when you give, a person may not be able to process it. That's a physical barrier. Or maybe you have too much of information on your gadgets. The gadget starts working slow. Now what is happening? क्योंकि उसमें इतना storage space ही नहीं है ना. So these are all barriers. How can you overcome? And each one of us deals with these barriers on a daily basis. कैसे डील कर सकते हैं? सबसे पहले, if you're working in a space in an office, if you are somebody who is there in an office and who is the one who owns it or runs it, ensure that the workspaces, there's less distance between the people who are working there so that they can communicate, right? Today, yes, we have cubicle systems. We have a hall and then people are sitting in cubicles, so they're close to each other. Cabin systems have gone, they vanished majorly. So just a second. Okay. So, just a second. I think there's some chat happening, and I'm just trying to. Okay. Now, sorry, I'll just come back to it. So, one way to deal with a physical barrier is that office spaces में आप लोगों को पास रखिए. Right, pass rakhiye so that you know they can communicate easily. There's no shouting happening. If possible, have workspaces close by. Communicate personally. If technology is not helping you, if you know you might end up on the wrong side of it, बहुत sure है, so personally communicate कर लीजिए. Why? Through technology. Share precise and crisp message. छोटा message करिए please, because that is very very important. छोटा message आप लिखेंगे, clear message लिखेंगे, तो वो दूसरे को अच्छे से समझ में आएगा, right? Reduce the noise around you. If you are in a space जहां पर बहुत शोर है, कभी नोटिस किया है पार्टीज में जाते हैं, बहुत लाउड म्यूजिक है, आप एक दूसरे से बात नहीं कर पाते हैं, आप चीख के बात कर रहे होते हैं, कुछ समझ नहीं आता है, गला खराब हो जाता है. Well, if you really want to communicate something important, ensure there is less noise around you so that you can at least get your point across without that disruption, right? Technology. App ensure kariye your technology is updated, it has enough storage. Today the world runs on technology, UI, everybody. It's not possible without a phone now. It's not possible without a laptop for most of the professionals, right? We need all of these things. So कोशिश करिए कि आप टाइम टू टाइम उसको अपडेट करते रहिए. उसमें अगर एक्स्ट्रा स्टोरेज नहीं डाल पा रहे हो तो जो है उसमें से हटा दीजिए and create that storage space for it. So please ensure कि आप वो space create करें. आप जब मैसेजेस डालते हैं तो टेक्स्ट मैसेजेस, सो नोटिस द ऑटो चेक्स दैट हैपन. वो स्पेल चेक जो होता है जिसको हम वो ऑटोमेटिकली ऑटो करेक्ट हो जाता है. एंड समटाइम्स आवर फोन्स आर फेड विद अ लैंग्वेज जो हमारा बहुत बार हम हिंदी में लिखते हैं, हिंदी को इंग्लिश में लिखते हैं. इट डजंट टेक दैट वर्ड और पॉसिबली इट्स फेड विद अनदर, एक प्री फेड वर्ड होता है उसमें डिक्शनरी में. तो आप क्या कर सकते हो? आप ensure the message before sending, just read it once. Okay, एक बार कोशिश करिए, because that distorts the whole message. उसका पूरा meaning चला जाता है. So please make sure, rather than being sorry later, it's better to be a little cautious before you do that. So you can avoid these physical barriers, or you can afford to work around it. Just need to be a little mindful of it, right? To write if this is actually helping you. And what is this message? I'm just trying to. There's a message that's come. I'm not able to read it. I know there's a message, but for some reason it's just not popping up. Okay. Okay. Abhinav, I think, yeah, you're writing how to overcome psychological barriers. I just discussed this before the physical barriers. Maybe you'll have to go back to the whole the recording later to understand when I discuss the psychological and the emotional barriers. So I just discussed that. But once I finish all the barriers, I'll see if I can answer your question again, right? Cool. Stay on, because the next barrier is also very, very important, especially in today's times where we all are not just citizens of our country, we have become citizens, we've become global citizens. हम global citizens बन चुके हैं. हम लोग सिर्फ अपने उस शहर में बैठकर काम नहीं कर रहे हैं. We are dealing with people from across the globe. You might be in a small city, small town of state in maybe Uttar Pradesh or maybe in the eastern part of India. But you are actually through your work and your gadgets to the internet, you're dealing with the whole world. So cultural barriers can be a big setback. Even in today's times, most of the companies are hiring people from different backgrounds and different cultures, so that diversity is there. So ensure that this barrier doesn't hamper you. I'm going to talk about it. सबसे पहले cultural barriers में आप notice करेंगे cultural backgrounds, लोग आते हैं अलग अलग background से आते हैं, behaviors अलग होते हैं, religions अलग होते हैं, उनके belief systems अलग होते हैं, their accents are very different, their gestures are very different, not just in a country itself but across the whole world. A particular accent, a particular gesture, which is acceptable in one part of the world, may not be acceptable in another part of the world. And just because you have lived for maybe 30, 40 odd years of your life, 20, 30, whatever your ages, you've lived in a particular belief system or culture, and something that is accepted, it becomes your lifestyle. But when you move to a different culture, you have to be very mindful of it. आपको ध्यान देना बहुत जरूरी होता है कि क्या आपको जो आता है वो एक्सेप्टेबल है भी या नहीं, right? So how is it that you can deal with cultural barriers? सबसे पहले तो have a very clear and polite communication, especially अगर आप किसी और culture के लोगों के साथ डील कर रहे हैं. Please be very polite and please be very clear in your communication. Okay, do not come with another barrier which I'm going to talk at the end. उसके बारे में बात करूंगी. अगर वो barrier आ जाएगा तो polite नहीं हो पाओगे. So we will talk about that barrier a little later. Do not use slangs. Slangs या community based phrases होते हैं, हम लोगों की आदत होती है, बहुत words use करने की. Do not use them because uh, आजकल बहुत एक slang चल रहा है, bro, I'm doing this, bro. Doesn't work everywhere, right? Everybody can't be your bro, but there are many people who talk like that, dude, mate, bro. किसी कल्चर में ये चीज एक्सेप्टेबल होगी, बाकी में नहीं होगी. Everybody moves differently, so understand what is it that you need to say, what is it that you need to avoid. Okay, you can use with your own people, but possibly not with somebody from another culture. Learn about other cultures. आप किसी कंपनी में जब जॉब के लिए जाते हो, whenever you go, don't you research about that company? किसी बिजनेस डील के लिए जा रहे हो, क्या आप उस जिनके साथ आप बिजनेस करने जा रहे हो, क्या उनके बारे में नहीं जानते? तो if you are going to be working or moving to a particular city or a country which has a different culture, then why not know about them? जितना ज्यादा आप पढ़ेंगे, जितना ज्यादा आप समझेंगे दूसरे कल्चर्स के बारे में, उतना ज्यादा it's going to be helpful for you because you'll be able to understand them. थोड़ा वक्त लग सकता है पढ़ने में एंड एक्सपीरियंस करने में, एक गैप हो सकता है, बट दैट्स गोइंग टू हेल्प यू, राइट? Be more accepting and open minded. I am not the only person who exists. My culture is not the only one that exists. I have to work with people from other cultures, so I need to understand what's acceptable in theirs, right? So be very mindful, be open, be accepting, accept people for other cultures. Sorry, I have a very bad throat. Share your knowledge about your culture. Share करिए. If somebody doesn't know, educate them. उनके साथ share करिए आप क्या सोचते हैं, आप क्या करते हैं, and what happens in theirs. Ask questions, share yours. It's very, very important to understand how other people operate and how you operate. Avoid conflicts. Most of the conflicts happen by difference in opinions. I agree. Each one of us is very, very strongly connected with our understanding, our belief systems, and our culture. But having an argument with others about their thinking and ours is not going to land us in any heaven, okay? We are going to be in conflict only. So avoid conflicts if possible, right? I don't need to say much about it. I don't want to share much opinions here, but we all know what's happening across the world. So it's sometimes better to avoid conflicts, right? Everybody has the right to coexist. So that's how it works. And if you don't know anything, just ask. पूछ लीजिए ना अगर आपको पता नहीं है like there are certain gestures which are acceptable in this part of India may not be acceptable in Japan. So आप पूछ लीजिए if you're visiting Japan or if you're interacting with anybody from their culture, ask what is it that they follow or is this particular gesture acceptable, right? So there are a few things, the way they bow down, the way they hand over their cards, the visiting cards, the business cards, बहुत चीजें हैं. So अगर आप किसी के साथ डील कर रहे हैं तो आप वहां से उनके हिसाब से डील कर सकते हैं. So be more mindful, be more accepting, ask questions, share your knowledge and learn about them and enjoy working with each other. And I'm sure in that whole process, you will learn something new, the other person will learn something. So I've spoken with you three barriers: psychological and emotional, physical barriers, and the cultural barriers. And abhi aate hain ek both important barrier pe. And I'm sure that's a barrier for each one of us on this earth because hum sabko sari languages nahi aati hai. So language can definitely be a barrier, especially when we move around the world or if you're traveling. Language can be a barrier. Yes, English has become a global language today, international language, acceptable in most parts of the world. But when you also talk with locals sometimes, if you're traveling in some part of the world, if you're interacting with locals, you might need to know the language. शायद नहीं पता हो उसके बाद आप interact नहीं कर पाओ, एक barrier आ जाएगा, एक lack of information होगा. So that is something that can definitely, be of help here. What I'm going to share with you. So किस तरीके के language barriers आते हैं? सिर्फ language नहीं जो मैं आपसे बात कर रही हूँ. Language barriers में आते हैं some terminology जो आप familiar ना हो. Okay, sometimes I receive policies from my insurance policies का document आता है, मैं उसमें पढ़ती हूँ, मुझे बहुत सारी terminology समझ ही नहीं आती है. And sometimes it happens that when I'm training or conducting a training with the engineers and they're given a task, तो उनका जो इंजीनियरिंग वोकेबुलरी निकल के आता है ना, मुझे कुछ समझ नहीं आता है, मुझे सिर्फ अपना टास्क दिख रहा होता है. And I have to tell them, I said, you did it perfectly well. The skill that I was looking for is perfect, but I didn't understand half of the things that you mentioned because that was all technical. I'm not a technical person. I'm a soft skills trainer. I'm a communication skills trainer. So I work on soft skills. So वो hard skill के बारे में जब बात करते हैं, मुझे कुछ समझ नहीं आता है, right? So that is a barrier. Abbreviations, short forms हम लोग यूज करते हैं, that can be a barrier. And unknown language की बात मैं आपसे कर ही चुकी हूँ. And another thing that is also a barrier is difficult vocabulary. Today everybody tells you to build vocabulary build करो and then फिर आप अपनी vocabulary झाड़ने लगते हो. लेकिन कभी कभी others may not know what you want to say, right? So अपनी audience को जानना भी तो जरूरी है. So आप ऐसी vocabulary यूज कर रहे हो जो दूसरे को समझ ही नहीं आ रही है, आपके हिसाब से इजी होगी, आप अपना शो ऑफ कर रहे हो लेकिन दूसरे को कुछ समझ नहीं आया. So there is going to be a communication gap there. How can you deal with this? Use simple language. देखो ऐसा है, आपको जो चीज आज तक टच की होगी या समझ में आई होगी वो सिर्फ सिंपल ही रही होगी. Anything that touches your heart is always going to be simple and relatable. So use simple and relatable vocabulary, relatable language. If you are going or dealing with somebody from a different culture or country where language is a barrier, actual language is a barrier, proper, find a translator. आजकल तो गूगल ट्रांसलेटर भी आता है. वी टाइप इन इंग्लिश पर वो हिंदी में ले लेता है या हिंदी में भी और अलग अलग लैंग्वेजेस में भी होता है. सो you can use whatever you wish to. आप एक ट्रांसलेटर ढूंढ लीजिए. Look for visual methods of communication. ठीक है, words are not helping you, signs. So use visual ways, कोई prop उठा के दिखा दिया कि मैं ये चीज, this is what I'm trying to talk about, yeah, this. So even if the language is not understood, your visual cues can help you communicate. तो आप उसका इस्तेमाल करिए, अपने हाथों का, अपने facial expressions का, body का, आसपास जो props रखे हैं, चीजें रखी हैं, use all of that. That can definitely help you. Frequently ask. If you're dealing with somebody from another, जिनको language दूसरी है, constantly ask them if they are understanding what you're trying to say. Rather than asking at the end, keep asking in between. So that if you need to re-explain, you can do that. ठीक है? तो धीरे धीरे बीच बीच में पूछते रहिए कि सब कुछ समझ में आ रहा है या नहीं. Another thing is, don't use jargon. अब jargon क्या होता है? Jargon are words, they are technical words which are usually used by a particular community. जैसे मैं आपको बता रही थी कि इंजीनियर्स का अपना टर्मिनोलॉजी होता है, बैंकर्स का अपना टर्मिनोलॉजी होता है, इंश्योरेंस एजेंट्स का अपना होता है, मेडिकल people, professionals have their own terminology. So every community, every profession has its own special words, which is jargon. Jargon for others. Okay, if you are a doctor and you have some specific terminology, the way you interact with other doctors and they understand it, I may not understand. Right? So it's jargon for me. मेरे लिए है jargon. Okay? आपके लिए normal है, मेरे लिए jargon है. क्या हुआ? Gap आ गया. I didn't understand anything what you said. Right? So be very, very mindful of that also. Sometimes language can also become a barrier when you're speaking too fast. But I am a fast speaker actually. अभी तो मैं बहुत slow बोलती हूँ. But there have been times where I have spoken really fast. And not that I was in a hurry to end, but it was basically, that's how it was. So speak slowly. If you notice that language is becoming a barrier, speak slowly. Apna speech rate ko slow rakhiyega, right? So do not speak very, very fast. One last thing, simple vocabulary, simple language and simple vocabulary. Show off the vocabulary in front of people who can understand it. But if they cannot understand it, please do not show off your difficult vocabulary in front of people who will not understand. So वहां पर जरूरत नहीं है. So vocabulary को रखिए simple. Okay. So let me know if the 4 barriers that I've discussed with you have helped you, because I'm going to come to the last one now. Do write in the chat if you are understanding, आपको समझ में आ रहा है मैं कि किस तरीके से इन barriers को overcome कर सकते हैं. Okay, the last one is the barrier that I told you कि ये मत करिएगा क्योंकि वो that means you're playing up with another barrier. And the other barrier is, बहुत बार सोचा आपने लोगों में बड़ा एटीट्यूड है यार, इसमें मतलब एटीट्यूड है वाला बंदा है, एटीट्यूड वाले लोग हैं, too much of attitude, man, I can't deal with it. That's another barrier. That is attitudinal barriers. Okay, attitude का भी एक barrier होता है, and this is what I'm going to talk about next, which is very, very important. Now, this is a major obstacle. Okay, major obstacle. It can make you very biased. It can distort the whole conversation. You actually start looking down on people if you have this kind of an attitude barrier inside you. Your perception is very limited. आप एक अपने छोटे से फ्रेम से फिल्टर से ही लोगों को देखते हो. That's what happens. This comes from your personal belief system. It comes from your status, your power, your culture. So ये attitude कहाँ से आता है? And we can find 101 people around us. Even right now, if I ask you to just count the number of people, you'll have a long list who might have this attitude barrier, where you cannot communicate with them because of their attitude, right? It can be either sides. You can be the person who's the sender of the communication or the person who's listening, the receiver of it. So कोई भी हो सकता है. Personal conflicts होंगे, management poor होगा, self management as well as आपका management with people. You will not be able to interact much with people. You'll become very judgmental. You look down on people, and you'll have a lot of stereotype and prejudice. Prejudice होता है आपके जो बिलीफ सिस्टम्स के साथ आप आगे बढ़ते हो कि ये कम्युनिटी ऐसी होती है, लड़कियां तो ऐसी होती हैं, लड़के ऐसे होते हैं, दोज काइंड ऑफ प्री सेट नोशंस जिनको हम बोलते हैं, प्री कंसीव नोशंस जो हम माइंड में लेके चलते हैं. So attitude barrier is very, very important, just in case if you have it. If you have it, you'll never accept that you have it. But for that, you need to be a good observer. How to overcome this? I'm talking about that. You need to be a good observer. You need to pay attention to details. Now, details, whoever it is, this side or that side of the communication, पर आपको वहां पर होना बहुत जरूरी है. अब आप सोचिए क्या नोटिस करना है आपने. You are supposed to notice people's reactions to you. लोगों के reactions आपके लिए क्या है? Okay, notice what are they pointing. Okay, आप किस चीज को वो पॉइंट करना चाह रहे हैं, उनके रिएक्शंस किस तरफ, what are they actually connecting to. So you will have to identify, one person is saying the same thing, the second saying the same thing, third is saying the same thing. So if you're observing all of this very well, and if you're listening to each one of these details, you'll understand what needs to be tweaked. Use the body, understand and listen to the body language also. So details mein sab aata hai. So understand, listen to the body language, because if you're noticing the body language of the other person, you will understand what is really happening. And is somebody getting really upset in front of you? Is somebody getting really intimidated? What is happening between you and the other person or the receiver, right? Very important to know. Organize your thoughts. Suppose if I have an attitude barrier, I am full of attitude, right? And I come here and blah 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 blah, and I just come and I just spit it out whatever I want to. My attitude is taken over. Big deal. Who cares? I've done my bit. Now there's a big barrier. What can I do? I can write down my thoughts. If I need to speak about something and I know that yeah, attitude aa jata hai bar bar, write it down so that things are more structured. When things are more structured, you know what you would like to say and speak. And then you would be actually delivering the message in a more impactful way. So be very, very, very careful of this particular barrier and how to overcome this. Another thing, people with this kind of barrier, attitudinal barrier, they focus a lot on the negatives. तुमने ये सही नहीं किया, you haven't done this right, you could have done this better, you know what, I can tell you how to do this. They work a lot on what's not right. To overcome this barrier, focus on the positives, focus on the capabilities, focus on the abilities of a person, because that's the only way it can help you overcome this particular barrier. Be respectful, be grateful. Gratitude is attitude. I totally believe in that. When you're more grateful for things that you have rather than what you don't have, it calms you down as a person, big time, right? We all are a work in progress, and it calms you down as a person. So be more respectful and grateful towards other people and whatever they might contribute towards, your life. Now, see, it can also be you're a team leader. Imagine you're a team leader, and you notice that your team never comes to you. They do come to you, but they're more scared to come to you rather than more open coming to you. That is a sign. Okay, that is a sign. Maybe the way you're reacting to them, or you're just pointing out their mistakes. Maybe observing their interaction with you could help you overcome and understand and overcome this particular barrier at your end. Reduce distractions, because sometimes when there's a lot of noise, I want to communicate something to you, but there's a lot of noise around me. So I will get affected by that noise, and then I'm going to take out all the irritation on the person who's listening to me. Okay? Not realizing what I'm doing. I'm getting affected and triggered, but I'm blurting it out. And I'm showing attitude to the other side. So that is one barrier, how you can overcome it. Soften your tone. Okay, soften your tone. अपनी tone को पे थोड़ा सा ध्यान दीजिए. That's a very major part of your non-verbal communication. It's not about words. It's about how you say it. It's not about what, but how. So how comes from the tone. So might as well focus a little bit on your tone and get that feedback. Encourage feedback either which ways. अगर आपको दिख रहा है कि दूसरा गलती कर रहा है, उसके अंदर ये बैरियर आ रहा है, उस वजह से आ रहा है, फीडबैक दीजिए, प्यार से दीजिए, टोन राइट करके दीजिए, सुनने नहीं वाला अगर ये एटीट्यूड बैरियर है तो. अगर आपके अंदर बहुत एटीट्यूड है और आप नोटिस कर पा रहे हैं तो लोगों से फीडबैक लीजिए. Okay, because this particular barrier, attitude barrier, is something that can change only when it's internal. बिकॉज अगर मेरे अंदर एटीट्यूड है, मुझे नहीं दिखेगा, पूरी दुनिया को दिखेगा. ओके, मुझे समझना पड़ेगा. एंड आई विल नेवर अंडरस्टैंड अनलेस एंड until I introspect or take feedback, right? So ask for feedback and be ready to accept that feedback if you want to work on this particular barrier of yours, right? Okay, so I've discussed 5 barriers with you: psychological and emotional, physical barrier, cultural barriers, language and attitudinal barriers. So do let me know which is that barrier that you face or you are affected by the most, which is that, which one affects you the most. Possibly you're at the receiving end or the giving end. It can be either which ways. So do write in the chat. And if you have any questions, please feel free to share. Possibly I can answer them. And in case you missed my live, in case you missed it, you can always go back to the recording and you can obviously share your thoughts on it. And to write in the chat, or you can directly message and ask me if you have any questions. If you want me to talk about anything related to communication, I can always take up that topic. And yeah, let's help you out with that. Cool. So any questions? But thank you so much for being a wonderful, wonderful audience. And whoever is there, see, this is a physical barrier. I have no idea who is there, who is not. I can only read a few comments as they come in. So thank you for that. And making me comfortable that yes, there is somebody listening on the other side. So I'm going to be back on Sunday. The reason why I came live today on a Saturday is because tomorrow Sunday there's a event that's happening tomorrow, and I'm a part of that event. It's a Success Gyan event where they are finding the top speaker, super speaker of this country, and out of nearly 225 lakhs of people, 2 lakhs and 25,000. Okay. So they came down to 1,000 and 1,000 to 250. So by your blessings and wishes, I have managed to come to the 250. And tomorrow is an event where all 250 of us are going to be sharing some inspiring life stories, real life stories. So not our stories, but somebody, a person away, not us. And we're going to be sharing their story. So you will get a chance to listen to 250 stories. And if you want to be a part of that event, uh, I think you should just register for it. You should just register for it and book your slot because they're very limited slots. I've posted something. I've posted something on the chat if you are able to actually see my comment there. So yeah, so you can go back to it and register your spot there. It's going to be a lovely. It's going to be a lovely event, and you're going to be listening to 250 power speakers. Okay, guys, thank you so much for your time, and I'm going to see you very soon next Sunday. Until then, take good care of yourself. And see you soon.